You're listening to Whoa! Potluck.
And hey, welcome to Books and Boba, a book club and podcast featuring books by Asian and Asian American authors. My name is Marvin Yue, and my co-host Rira Yu will be joining us later on for our author chat with Abraham Chang, who joins us to talk about his debut novel, 888, Love and the Divine Burden of Numbers, which is a coming-of-age love story taking place in mid-90s New York about a young man named Young and his relationship with Erina, who he meets while working at a record store. The story has been described as high fidelity meets To All the Boys I Loved Before, and is Abe's love letter to Western pop culture, Eastern traditions, and the first-generation Asian American experience. We had a great chat with Abe as he shares about the inspirations for his story, as well as his own personal journey as someone who comes from the publishing side of the industry before deciding to become a novelist himself. As always, Books and Boba is supported in part by our listeners at our Patreon. So if you'd like to become a bigger part of our book club, head on over to patreon.com/booksandboba. Our Patreon supporters can gain access to our Books and Boba members only Discord server, as well as our monthly bonus podcast Boba Chats, which is available only to Patreon supporters. So with that out of the way, please enjoy our conversation with Abraham Chang.
And we're here with Abraham Yu Chang, who is an award-winning published poet with an MFA in creative writing from NYU. He has worked in the publishing industry since 2000 and currently manages special sales for Simon & Schuster. And we are here to talk about his debut novel, 888, Love and the Divine Burden of Numbers. Welcome to the show, Abe. Can I call you Abe?
Yes, please call me Abe. All my friends call me Abe. Thank you so much.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Yeah. As we do, we'd like to start off our author chats asking our authors about their writing journey. So can you give us a brief synopsis of how you became a novelist?
Oh, okay. So we're going to try to condense a lot of history into a very short period of time. So, let's fast forward and we're going to do the montage instead of the long full on story. So, basically, I went into, I went to my beloved Stuyvesant High School. It's a very science and math focused public school in New York City that's well known. And I always gravitated towards kind of the English and the arts. I was a theater kid, loved music, all sorts of stuff like that. But I was convinced I was going to go pre-med, ended up going to Tufts as an undergrad, and there just kind of got wrapped up in becoming an English major and maybe still doing pre-med. And I held on a little too long until I finally let go and said, you know what, I'm going to go study abroad at UCL for my junior year. And I went full in as an English major focusing on poetry. So I ended up applying to NYU's creative writing program, one of the best MFA programs in the world, very competitive. And I was very lucky to end up working with my favorite poet of all time, Philip Levine there. So that MFA program, I went there fresh undergrad, spent 2 years there, got my MFA, and, got spit out into the world of what do you do with an MFA in creative writing, especially in poetry. That doesn't pay the bills. So I ended up going into educational publishing, working in editorial for many years, trying to figure out what I was going to do, what my livelihood was, and published poetry on the side, wrote freelance for Anime Insider magazine, which is now defunct. And then, ended up trying to get into the trade publishing side of things at DK Publishing, ended up going back to educational publishing and ended up helping to pay for my wedding. And then the greater part of the last decade at Simon & Schuster. And during this whole time, I'm kind of, looking at my life as a writer, as somebody with an MFA, but at the same time trying to keep my head afloat and trying to pay the bills. And it was just kind of a light bulb moment one day when I got an advanced reader copy of a book that our head of sales gave to me. He said, "Hey, but I'd love to hear what you think about this." And I read the book. I'm not going to name names, but I read the book, gave it a decent review, sent my review to the editor and our head of sales, and they were like, "This is one of the best reviews we've ever read." And that was the light bulb moment. I was like, what just happened? 20 years went by, and I've been working to kind of help other authors and other writers achieve their dreams. And I never really got back to writing. So, it was then that I said, whatever happens, I'm going to start writing again. And pulled out all of my notes, about this novel that I had, an idea 4 years ago, and just started writing. And then we hit the pandemic. So this was my pandemic baby. A lot of this 888 Love was written during the pandemic, but the idea for it gestated 20 plus odd years ago. It was kind of a blink and you're waking up to your life and realizing that what you thought was just a temporary job or a job to pay the bills became a career. And it was that kind of moment where I just kind of put the brakes on and decided that I was going to really focus on this no matter what, and use all of my spare moments to write this book as much and as fast as possible. Because the pandemic, when we started living the darkest timeline, our tomorrows were not guaranteed anymore. So basically get busy living and just do what you want to do.
Yeah. It's interesting that, you had worked in the publishing industry for years and years before becoming an author yourself. How was that transition? Like, was it weird to kind of be on the other side for once?
So, okay. So this is, that you're getting me on a day. So I left my day job. Tomorrow is my last official day at Simon & Schuster.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. It's something to be celebrated. At the same time, I'm terrified, because a lot of that publishing world industry knowledge is from a different perspective. Cause I was in the sales department. I started off in editorial as an editorial assistant, and, I kind of got pushed into the sales position because I was the mouthy kid in the back row with his hand up, always kind of having an opinion. So I slowly got kind of pushed into the sales role because people thought that's not typical for an editor. You got a big mouth on you, kid. So, I'm glad I've met these coworkers and colleagues, and, through the years, I've become kind of this new biz development, kind of person. And I've worked with, a lot of these big brands, comic book companies, movie companies, all through my different jobs, through the publishing industry. So I know a part of it, but this author side of things is a little bit different, because the sales side of things that I was part of is in special sales. And special sales, for people who aren't in the publishing world, is all the weird stuff. Like, I work with literacy programs. I work with B2B kind of sales. Like, if your HR department gives you a book, it's probably, I had something to do with helping them, select a book and buy that book. So anything kind of outside the normal retail channels, I kind of had a little bit of experience with. So my perspective from the publishing world was very unique in terms of looking at how these authors, kind of sold their books, and, sitting in on meetings where, my colleagues are talking about their accounts or their specific part of the business. So I'm absorbing as much industry info as I can, even though my day-to-day is, pretty much separate. So it's an interesting perspective. But at the same time, since I've been there for 20 plus years, I kind of know how that sausage is made. And one of my colleagues was like, "Abe, this is your time on the other side of the fence. You got to be able to enjoy the sausage too. So just sit back, relax, trust the process of your colleagues." And the publishing world is a very small place, so a lot of the folks there are friendly with each other. So there was no real kind of competition. It's just kind of a bit of imposter syndrome. It's kind of like, what am I doing? Are people really responding to what I've done? And not, because I'm a colleague. And the short answer is yes, because there's really no kind of shortcuts. If anything, being in the publishing industry and publishing was a bit of a detriment, because they were kind of like, who's this guy? Who does he think he is? And it's really merit based, and it was all kind of in the read. And I've asked multiple people, and they were just like, relax. If anything, anything. Like, your credentials really didn't mean anything. It was really what you wrote and like the people responded to the actual content. So
that's really interesting because I know your book is published by Flatiron, which is a Macmillan imprint, and you worked for Simon Schuster while you were through the process. Like, was that kind of weird? Like, I don't know if there's like
okay, so my shorthand of kind of talking about the business is that it's my own personal DC versus Marvel. On one hand, I love Wolverine. On the other hand, I love Batman. And like, I'm not going to take sides. I'm going to buy my X-Men comics. I'm going to buy my Batman comics. I'm buying both. So, in this analogy, who's DC, who's Marvel? I take your pick. But like Simon and Schuster is my family. It's my beloved family. Macmillan, Flatiron. I've gotten to know them, and they're my publisher. So I'm always team books. So that's kind of my attitude towards being on represented by two companies.
Yeah.
I also like to say, I mean, if Simon and Schuster wanted you so much, they should have bought your book. So
we can talk
I mean, shots fired,
but yeah, a lot of the stuff is that's like inside baseball, like pouring the tea kind of stuff. But the less said, the better. But there's certain reasons and there's certain things. But yeah, I'm proud to have been published by Flatiron Macmillan. It was the right choice. And I'm proud that my Simon and Schuster family was so supportive and is still so supportive of me.
Yeah. I mean, who knows why decisions are made? People know.
Yeah.
But so let's get into it. Can you tell our listeners what 888 Love and the Divine Murder of Numbers is all about?
Okay, so we're gonna try to do spoiler free, right? As much as possible.
As much as possible.
As much as possible. So the elevator pitch basically is, 888 Love and Divine Murder of Numbers is an 80s and 90s kind of retro fresh, nostalgia filled, pop culture filled sort of coming of age tale where the primary cast is Pan-Asian Americans. And it deals with the themes of mental and spiritual health, nature versus nurture, and like free will versus destiny. So all of that kind of the meaning of life, big stuff, but wrapped up in, let's say a reality bites or a singles or a high fidelity type of rom-com where you're seeing the whole cast as Asian Americans versus, Winona Ryder, who just kind of looks sort of Asian, but, you're getting that cast of characters in that sort of film, if you will. And instead of Long Duck Dong in 16 Candles, you're, as the butt of the joke, he's the main character and his friends are also the main characters. So I kind of describe it as that, the plot, if people want to know about the plot, Young, our main character, he's growing up with this, we'll call it OCD, where he has this sense of numbers and patterns and looking for them everywhere. And this is kind of how he lives his life. And it stems all the way back to, his Eastern traditions and upbringing that his family and especially his beloved uncle kind of, teaches him when he's young about all these Asian superstitions and beliefs. And then at the same time, he's absorbing all of this Western pop culture that he loves. And he's filtering all of this into this kind of belief system of this is how I make decisions and this is how I get through life. So, a lot of that, it's all around tropes. So there's certain things that, I'm trying to set up and hopefully subverting and, kind of teaching the reader how to read the book, and kind of setting up things where if you recognize, especially the pop culture, if you recognize something there, you're going to get it on a deeper level than kind of just the uncle said, I have 7 great loves in my life and I meet this girl and she's number 6. So I'm going to look back on the first 5 loves and see if this number 6 girl is really it, or if there's going to be, a number 7 later on. So that in short is kind of the plot, but there's a lot more to it.
Yeah. I mean, reading your book, especially the first chapter, the first primary chapter, I definitely felt the high fidelity vibes. I was wondering if that was what you were going for, but I'm glad to see that was, one of the inspirations.
Yeah, I thought the concept for your book was pretty interesting. As someone who, was, peak millennial, I missed out on a lot of the cultural touchstones of of the 90s. So it was like really cool to like read about like how people use beepers and like what kind of music people listen to. And I also thought the character of Young was really interesting because he is someone who is obsessed with numbers, and it reads like he has OCD. Can you tell us a little bit more about his character and how his voice came to you?
So, Young, a lot of people will automatically kind of wonder if Young is me, and to a certain extent, I'm all of the characters. This was basically the biggest psychotherapy experiment for myself that I went through, writing these characters as kind of my id, my ego, my super ego, all mixed together. But speaking for Young as the main character, that kind of Gen X idea of not talking about our mental health, not talking about where we are, where we're dealing with our problems, and we're okay with it, and we don't necessarily want to broadcast the issues that we have, and that we're trying to figure out how to navigate life with this issue. And part of it is this nature versus nurture kind of idea of, mild spoilers in the book, like when Young goes through his trip in China and he's experiencing kind of the rhythms and patterns of this Chinese ancient structure where there's numbers and, seeing all these things everywhere. He has a sense of relief that he feels like, oh, it's not just me. My forefathers had this kind of thing and it's in my blood, so I can't help it. So part of that OCD nature of it's okay because, it's not just you, it's everyone. I think part of that goes through this process of, self-discovery and how to manage certain things, that we didn't necessarily have the tools or the language to really talk about, as Gen Xers back then. And I think a lot of that, that certain part of that story kind of comes from, me and my family and, my friends who all kind of experience certain things like that. When we get together, it's a thing that we don't talk about, but we kind of acknowledge it that, yeah, Popo, when she was going through this, we don't talk about her mental health, but we knew that there was an issue there. And that's why we all kind of paid special attention to her. And it's just kind of, it goes unsaid, but we all know it kind of thing.
When I heard the premise of the book and like read the book jacket description, I knew right away that this was going to be Marvin's book because he always talks about like how he wishes that he read a book where it goes into like Asian culture in like California. And I was like, oh, this is like kind of the opposite. It's like East Coast Asian culture. And I feel like being an Asian American in Queens, in New York City, it's a very like specific, unique experience. And as someone who, went to Stuyvesant, like I'm just curious as to like how much you poured your own personal experience into building Young's world.
And, I was very lucky to have been invited to go back to Stuyvesant to speak at, this is so full circle, one of our older classmen who used to sit in our creative writing classes, who I thought was like the coolest person ever. She ended up teaching at Stuyvesant, and, through a mutual friend, we were put together. And then I went back to my high school and I got to speak to two of her classes. And then last night we had a virtual event with kind of Stuyy alumni. And the question that kept coming up from the Stuyy kids, who are Stuyy kids in, 2024. And like my classmates is like, how much of this is autobiographical? And I always tell people, it's like, at this point, everything is fiction. We're looking at like 20, 30 years of memories, and half of this stuff is like that one person was inspired by 7 or 8 different people. That one class, I don't remember if that was exactly how that happened, but it was inspired by these actual events and, how we grew up with, definitely embellishment. But, as I'm talking to, my friend now who's teaching there, we always say Stuyy kids are Stuyy kids. They're always going to be these brilliant kind of introverted / extroverted kids who have all these, expectations for the future. We're very motivated and have, a world of interest. And the important thing to me is that those Stuyy kids pay attention to details. They take their time and they kind of, a lot of them obsess over little things. And that is a common through line for any of us that kind of went through that system. And that's something that I hope readers of any generation will kind of look into my book and just realize that, okay, we have YouTube, we have Spotify, we have the internet now. So a lot of the stuff we can look up online. And, it's not the 90s anymore where it's hearsay. You heard one person teach you, what this means in pager code, and you just have to take their word for it. And it might mean something else to somebody else. But like now there's, you can kind of cross-reference it. But in general, it's more about the feeling than the actual, nonfiction details. It's definitely fiction.
Yeah. And I also feel like, because, you mentioned the internet, like we don't have YouTube, we don't have Spotify. And back then you really had to just kind of accidentally stumble across things that you like and into like these sub underground scenes as well. And I just like totally felt that through Young, because I feel like he's accidentally stumbling across his interests. And same thing with him introducing his girlfriends to the things that he likes. It's like very intimate, especially with like burning mix CDs and like finding discount DVDs in like the DVD bin, and like figuring out like what is going to last like 10 years from now. It's like, what is going to be the tastemaker? And it was really fun to read as someone who did not live during that zeitgeist.
Yeah, do you remember record stores at all?
Listen, I didn't really have that experience of going to CD shops and like looking through albums. My cousins, they would like give me their hand-me-downs, and that's kind of like how I discovered music and stuff. But I didn't really have that much of an experience, Marvin. So
that makes me feel so old.
I remember.
I'm very old too. So
I remember back when I was in college, like when I was working, I worked at the cafeteria, and whenever I got my paycheck, I would just go straight to Tower Records and just pick a CD just to buy with my own money. That doesn't happen anymore. I really love that, the first scene after, the introduction to Young's Uncle Susu is about him working in a record store and just being a little pretentious about it.
Mm-hmm.
That was just really cool.
Yep.
It just definitely gave me like those high fidelity vibes.
And again, a lot of this is, I'm leaning hard into tropes of like, I want you to recognize this character that I'm setting up in chapter 1 as, oh, he's going to be like this kind of guy, or, oh, she's going to be that kind of girl. And hopefully as you're reading it and you're learning the patterns, like in a book about patterns and systems and numbers, that you're getting the textual and metatextual experience of, here's this rhythm, here's this pattern, here's this kind of chapter, here's the next kind of chapter. Oh, this is a flashback chapter. Oh, this is a current year chapter. This is a Susu letter. That you're feeling all of this as a reader, and that you're kind of understanding a little bit of what this character might be going through because you're experiencing yourself. So that metatextual kind of reader's experience, I want people to kind of slow down and be like, yeah, wait a second. I feel like there's a little bit of an underlying magic trick that I'm trying to pull. I'm trying to inception people, if you will, that, okay, I'm telling you one thing, but if you're paying attention, there's something else going on. And then if you're paying attention to what else is going on, your appreciation of everything hopefully will deepen. And part of that is the pop culture. Part of that is the getting into the head of these characters a little bit and understanding that, there's a rhyme and reason, and there's a format, and there is a kind of wave that goes through the book and a momentum that I'm hoping people will start to feel as they're reading it.
Yeah, speaking of tropes, like your book really reminded me a lot of films. Like it reminded me of 500 Days of Summer with like its non-sequential timeline, non-linear timeline, and also like Scott Pilgrim with the X's, and also Ready Player One with all of the pop culture references. So even though it was like very the culture was new to me. Like it was very familiar and like, okay, I understand this trope. I understand this like rhythm and an unusual narrative structure. It's still familiar to me because it really did feel like an indie film in many regards. And your character Young is a cinephile. He loves movies, and I just wanted to ask you like were you a big movie fan, and like did you have to like go through, I guess, like a mental catalog of your favorite movies and be like, okay, yeah, that's something that I have to put into the book?
So again, mild spoilers here, and hopefully this is a spoiler that will kind of entice your listeners to pick up the book if they are cinephiles. Film directors appear to Young in dream sequences, and they're teaching him lessons about basically growing up as a young male in America, which happens to be an Asian American male. So you're getting different lessons that you're seeing at different points of Young's life. So you're getting George Lucas, you're getting Steven Spielberg, John Hughes, you're getting David Lynch, Brian De Palma. You know, I don't want to spoil too much, but like these directors are coming in and they're speaking to Young in a way that helps him make sense of his world, because his world is definitely East and West, Asian and American at the same time. So a lot of these directors are providing him with that blueprint for how to survive in America, or how to survive as a young American boy or teenager. And this is what you're seeing on the silver screen as, you know, what other people are going through, but you're not seeing that Asian American representation. So you have to translate it a little bit. So part of that pop culture for me, as, you know, a fan of film and movies and TV and comic books and everything, is just my way of making sense of all of that wonderful stuff that I love. But at the same time, I didn't see myself there. Like I had to insert myself into a lot of it, or just say, well, you know what? I'm not here, but maybe I'm just off screen and this is my experience there, and explaining that to the audience as they're kind of reading that chapter of, you know, everybody loves, you know, From Everything Everywhere All at Once, Jonathan Ke Quan. But for us growing up, we had Short Round in Indiana Jones, and we had Data in Goonies. And, you know, there's a lesson that Steven Spielberg in The Dream kind of conveys about that, and seeing that on screen and what that might mean to a young Chinese American boy growing up and having that as representation.
I did love that your main characters, Young and Erina, talk in pop culture references. It really reminded me of the way that, you know, my friends used to talk to each other in high school. And just a reminder that like, memes have existed throughout history. It's just, you know, back in the day it was quoting movie lines, and these days it's, you know, sharing social media posts. But it was really cool to kind of go back to that time where like, yeah, there was no internet. We got all of our memes from the things that we watched on TV and movies.
I like how you open up your book with kind of like the numbers guideline. Be like, okay, this is a good number, this is a bad number, and this is like a double bad number. And I'm Korean, so we have like a number thing too, but not as intense. But I know Marvin, like you said that you like the hand symbol for 8, that was like a Chinese thing, and I was like, oh, I didn't know that was like an actual thing that exists in real life.
I actually had like a mild crisis, because the symbol for 8 that you portrayed in the book, that symbol, as I learned, it was a symbol for 7. And I thought I was going crazy, and I asked my wife, who's also like, she's, I think, Chinese family's from Korea, and she said, yeah, that's 7. So I was like, is there like a difference? Because I looked online, and all the online sources coincide with what you portrayed in the book, which is like the finger gun symbol is 8. But I was like, this has always been 7 for me. So I was really confused.
there are regional differences, and like for me, like, you know, I had to second guess myself, because my mom and my aunts were like, wait, isn't that 7? I was like, for the purposes of the book, it's 8. And it works out well because of that. Because, you know, how many billions of Chinese people and Asian people are there? In every village, every different dialect, somebody's going to be saying something a little bit different. So part of that, I think, also kind of feeds into the general ethos of the book, where, you know, this is our personal little experience. You know, and Young's best friend, Gina, she is Filipina. His other best friend, Paris, he's Indian American. And that is his experience and kind of my experience with a Pan-Asian kind of group of friends that we don't know everything. We make our generalizations because my best friend, Chris, back then, he did this and he told me all Filipinos did this. And like, I just believe him, and it could be the truth or it could just be his family. We don't really know. So a part of the counting on the hand, a lot of it, there's enough of it that is corroborated by other people that I'm okay with it. But for the purposes of the book, the finger gun for 8 is just perfect.
I mean, if you search online, that's what the internet says too. So, who am I to contradict Google? But that was a really interesting moment. It was like learning something new about, like you said, regional cultures. And just so happens that my wife and I, even though we're not from the same place, have the same symbol for 7. I think that's a quintessential diaspora experience, which is like not knowing entirely all the cultural nuances because you didn't grow up immersed in it, whether by choice or by environment. And I love that that's also portrayed in the way one of Young's inspirations is his uncle, Susu, who he even admits is not how he should be calling him. He should be calling him Jojo, Xiaozhou. I really enjoyed that you have because we all have that one fun uncle, but there's a certain flavor of Chinese fun uncle that I think Susu definitely portrays, and I think you capture that really well.
And the other thing about the Susu thing is there's a deeper meaning to why he calls him Susu. I give all these reasons of couldn't understand why he calls all these other uncles Susu or Ai, and then his actual uncle, he has to call him this Jojo thing that he never heard of. So in his mind, that is why he calls him Susu, or he just couldn't say Xiao Jojo or whatever growing up. But then that also feeds into the whole main idea of the book is that we are making these assumptions. We're creating our own culture. We're creating things that we pass on, and it moves forward because it's originating from one place and it changes and mutates into something else until it feels right. So a lot of the book is about that. And it starts with that simple thing of just calling your beloved uncle this name, even though it's wrong, it's right. So there's a lot of that throughout the book of it's wrong, but it's right. And it does feel right.
Was Susu based on a real life? Did you have a real life crazy uncle that traveled the world? And because I have one, he's used to call him Boat Uncle because he worked on a merchant vessel. So whenever he's in port, we would go visit him in the port, and he tells all the stories about traveling around the world.
Well, Susu is literally, I would say, all of my uncles, all of my aunts, my cousins, my friends, people I've seen in movies, Chow Yun Fat. But secret is, I'm Susu. It's me. Well, it's my wish fulfillment. Okay, so a lot of that is how would I want to be? How cool would I want to be? And part of that is me imparting that wisdom to myself. So a lot of it is. That is, again, my psychotherapy session. This is my ego, my super ego, my id. And all the characters, all of the main characters to an extent are extensions of myself. But if we're going to boil it down to Susu, a lot of that is my wish fulfillment of how, if I was that badass, if I could just DGAF and just go out into the world as, this Mongolian, long ponytailed kind of biker warrior, would that be me? Would I have the guts to do that? And I'm glad I can put that into this character, and hopefully other people see that character as a source of inspiration or something to aspire to.
I mean, Susu gives some pretty solid advice, life is short, live in the now. And, I think about Susu's background as he was a lawyer and he did everything quote unquote right. And, his decision to, travel, to go on a road trip on his Harley and date as he goes, that must be such a foreign concept to a lot of our conservative Asians out there. But now that time has passed, I feel like I'm seeing a lot more Susus. I'm seeing a lot of my business school friends who are I'm quitting my job. I'm traveling the world. Life is short. This is the way to live. And it's oh, okay. It's nice to see that representation in an older timeline. It's yeah, these cool uncles existed before the internet happened.
And part of my goal in this book is to speak kind of that kind of truth of Asian male masculinity that we don't get to see very often. And that kind of person, can exist and does exist. And it's a spectrum of different types of Asian American males. And being, somebody who is 6 feet tall and built like a linebacker, I'm a little different than other typical Asian American males. So I've been able to kind of see things a little bit differently, but I wanted to give that voice to others that, we're not all nerds. We're not all accountants. I have terrible eyesight, but still, there's a stereotype that needs to change. And I think part of that is putting that out into the world that, there are these badass Asian American males that, don't necessarily shrink and back down from, conflict or aren't quiet. I think a lot of it is that the quiet Asian male kind of stereotype needs to go away.
I really enjoyed that your book, first and foremost, is a love story. It's about young love, this budding relationship between Young and Erina, and being in this relationship causes Young to look back on his past relationships. And one of my favorite parts, and I think the kids call it cringe, but like your chapter that follows like their email exchanges during their first like week of dating, and how he just gets like more and more unhinged as it goes on. I definitely felt that as someone who may or may not have sent those "why aren't you answering my emails" back in the day. Yeah,
I'm also like curious as to where the idea of like having 7 girlfriends and going back and reintroducing the loves of his lives, like where did that come from? Is that like a Chinese thing also, with like you only have 7 loves in your life? Is that actually a thing?
I think part of it is, again, I think it's something that you pick up when you're young. It's something that your uncle might have said to you on like Chinese New Year in passing as a joke. And then you just like, what? And you take it really seriously. Cause I don't remember where I heard it from, but I don't think I made it up. I feel like I've heard it from someone somewhere. So that 7 great loves kind of thing, it was, I didn't necessarily do the research and kind of do a deep dive into it, but it was just a pattern that was a trope that I've seen before in other forms of media that I just kind of latched onto that made sense. And it gave me an excuse to kind of go through the different loves to highlight a specific type of love, a specific type of person that you think you're going to love as an Asian American, thinking they're a heterosexual male going through life in America. Like, what kind of first love puppy crush are you going to have? It's probably, the little white girl with, cute freckles and brown hair. And then maybe as you're maturing, it's like, everybody, says I should be, with this other Chinese girl who's the only one in my class because we both look kind of the same. So that's another one to put in there. And, as part of the lessons from Susu in the book, those letters that kind of appear throughout the book in those specific chapters are basically telling the reader kind of the lesson of the chapter that you just read. That flashback chapter, Susu's letter, just happens to coincide on his journey, the lesson that, Young is supposed to be learning as he's thinking back on that first, second, third, fourth love of like, oh, okay, so this is Susu's experience with, having attraction to non-Asian females. And, how do I navigate that as, a Chinese American boy growing up and having the same kind of feelings? So that kind of lesson, gets taught in those sorts of letters throughout the book. So that is another pattern that I wanted readers to kind of pay attention to. But, that unhinged sort of, thing that your family has that, it's one of those, things that you see on TikTok. What does your family do that no other family does that you thought was a normal thing? It's kind of like that.
The 7 loves thing definitely struck me as like that thing your uncle told you 3 whiskeys in.
Yes.
Like, at a family gathering.
Yeah, and I just it reminded me of To All the Boys I Loved Before, like the guy version of just like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe I like what poured my heart out for these people. And it's like that's what growing up is. Like I don't know, like I thought it was actually pretty endearing when Young would be like, this is what our future is going to be like 10, 20 years from now. And I'm like, whoa, calm down, kid. You're like 15 years old. Like no need to plan a wedding right then and there. But it like made sense for his character, but also his age.
Again, I don't want to spoil things, but I'm dying to really start talking to book clubs when everybody's read the book. So I can basically come out and just say, hey guys, didn't you pay attention to this character and all the red flags? So there's a lot of that there.
There's a character in the book where I'm like, there's so many red flags, and Young is just breezing past them, and I'm like, oh well, to be Young, just
And you juxtapose Young's character with the main love of interest in the book, Erina, who is at first glance your typical manic pixie dream girl, like just free spirited. Was this the type of relationship you wanted to portray when you thought of this story?
So Erina, I think, is the character that I think a lot of folks will either love or hate at first glance. And I want people to kind of treat that character with an open mind. And there is a lot kind of that it gets revealed later on. There's a lot of stuff that isn't said. And one of the things that Erina does say a lot is assume, ask you me, like a third grader. It's that kind of thing where you're so blinded by the superficial that you're missing a lot of the story, and you're missing the other side of the story. So I think a lot of that, hopefully when you're reading the book and you're kind of getting to know the characters, is that you're seeing a little bit differently, and know that the book is told from a specific certain point of view, to quote Star Wars, and that there is a lot of other stuff there between the lines that you're taking for granted. So I want that experience also for people as they're reading it as part of the textual and metatextual experience. And, thinking about your own kind of high school or past relationships, and looking back on that and like putting that together and understanding where this character and her tropish nature and who is this person actually, if they were an actual person, like how could you imagine that person being so much more than what you initially thought they were?
Also, I like how you show that love comes in different forms. And I really love the fact that Young had these two besties who are like ride or die, and it's love. It's like, it might not be the swoony romantic love that a lot of people picture in film, but Young understands that it is just as important, and his friends have his back, and how lucky are we to have friends like that. And I thought this is a random question, but I thought it was interesting how you wrote the book in second person. Like, there would be times where it would say like, you are asking Erina out or whatever. And I'm like, whoa, okay. I'm like suddenly in Young's shoes. Was that something that you thought about from the very beginning when you were drafting?
Okay, so this will be the longer portion of our podcast today. So I love talking about this and explaining this. So this is very important to me. So this again is part of the patterns. It's a part of teaching the reader to read the book in a certain way. So the book, I would say almost half the book is written in the second person imperative, and the second person imperative, the you do this, you do that. And I'll be honest, my editor didn't like this in the beginning, and I had to fight my way to get this into the book, and how much of it that I didn't want to change. And the reason is this is such an integral part of me becoming a writer, is because I fell in love with this form. And it was in high school. I read Lori Moore. She wrote this short story collection called Self-Help, and in particular, this one short story, How. And the reason I was just entranced by this, it's a short story, and it's about, a nice white woman going through her life and like dating and all this stuff. And I just felt like I understood her 100%, even though that was the complete, other side of the spectrum for me to understand that kind of life. And I thought about that reason, and I we all experimented in writing in that format, and I just love that voice. And the more I thought about it, the more I wrote in that voice. It made me really wonder why. Why was I so attached to this? And part of it goes back to the most basic lizard brain sections of your memory. Is you remember you do this, you do that. It's your parents telling you what to do, giving you direction in life. It's Sunday school. It's the Bible telling you how to live a good life. You do this, you do that, or you don't do this, you don't do that. And then as a reader growing up, one of the earliest pleasures of reading on your own is choose your own adventure books. Turn to page 35, see if you survived. Did you drown? That kind of thing. That early memory of being a reader and growing up 80s and 90s, for us, the video games were just incredible. And especially like text games like Zork. You do this, you do that. All of that contributes to that kind of voice of immediate empathy. You're put in the shoes of that character because you're asked to. You have to do this because you have to, because you can't get away from it. And, the way that I'm trying to write the book, trying to get the reader into the head of Young, who's struggling with so much mental health issues, is to make it seem like this is you. You are doing this. You are going through this. This is hard. Can you imagine if you thought this way or you acted this way? And part of it is also questioning how much do you rely on that voice? Who is this voice that is telling you what to do? Who is directing you in your life? And that again goes to the whole, looking at the book as a whole of this is a book about free will and volition versus kind of destiny and a chosen path for you. What do you do? What do you want to do? And, when are you taking action? So that voice, that second person imperative, it really carries throughout the whole book. And as you're reading it, you'll notice that comes up in these flashback chapters of memory, of the earliest memories, and then working through the loves and going through the flashback first 5 loves. It's all written in that second person imperative. And then as you're reading it, hopefully the readers are noticing it, that starts creeping into the present timeline. And that you voice again is wait a second, this isn't the past anymore. This is the future. What does that mean? And I want to give that reader who has paid attention, who has kind of gotten used to this rhythm, that, sense of uneasiness of, wait a second, this isn't what I'm expecting. This is something else. And what's going to happen now? Because I don't know what to expect anymore. Because I got used to this sort of pattern and understanding what the author was trying to do. And all of a sudden, things are starting to change. I'm starting to feel weird. And that's intentional. So hopefully that's kind of carrying the readers through the book with that specifically, that form of writing and that voice.
Wow, that was a much more thorough answer than I expected, but I love it. I love this idea of free will and destiny and how it relates to the POVs and the way you write. It's very meta and very experimental. We are winding down towards the end of our interview, and I just wanted to throw in a fun question in there. So each chapter, you have these soundtrack highlights. You have 3 songs in there that's kind of captures the mood and theme of the chapter. Did you actually listen to those songs when you were drafting the chapter, or did you go back and you're okay, these are the songs that capture the mood?
Again, this is more Easter eggs for people to find. The chapter heads of the book are album names. So they're the names of albums, and then the soundtrack highlights are songs. So a lot of those are seriously setting the mood for what that chapter is going to be. Some of them are a lighter mood, and you'll know that, okay, that's a joke because that chapter is the, spoiler blah chapter, and those 3 songs are all kind of pointing at that kind of thing to happen. So that's a little lighter touch. And then there's just certain things that just fit that time period. So all of those songs, all of those musical artists are, just so happen to be in my Rolodex of, things that, I love, or I had to find something. And some of those changed. Some of that was there from the beginning. A lot of it is kind of showing the breadth and width of pop culture and how it affects us, no matter where we're coming from. I tell people that, the book starts with Don Henley and the Eagles, and it goes all the way through like Peter in the New Testament. That is the scope of the pop culture that we're dealing with. And certain songs will evoke a period or a feeling. And, some of the songs towards the end of the book, just listening to the first few chords of it, first few keyboard, arpeggios or whatever will bring me to tears, because it will immediately kind of evoke that time and place or that feeling in me. And hopefully if that reader can connect to that piece of pop culture, if it's something that is, filled with memories, that nostalgia will hopefully, have that same feeling stirred up in that person. Or if it's something new, I hope people discover those things and discover that sense of wonder of listening to those songs for the first time and just be like, wow, I never knew what the song was. I never heard these lyrics, never heard that voice. And that pop culture hopefully is, a little step towards world peace, which I believe. We're all walking Venn diagrams. If we can kind of bump into each other and say, hey, I like this. Do you like that? That's the beginning of a conversation, and I hope that, people reading this book are going to find these films, TV shows, comic books, and music to be something that they want to research and kind of delve a little bit deeper to kind of understand where I'm coming from and a lot of where, Gen X comes from also. And of course, there is an official Spotify playlist. All the songs and the bands that are mentioned in the book are, you can find that on my website, abrahamchang.com. That official playlist exists. Mostly bangers. There's a couple songs that are in there for context for the book, and you can skip those. But most of them, hopefully, you can just listen to it, just be like, wow, New Order, Depeche Mode, The Cure, Def Leppard, amazing.
Yeah, I'm elder millennial, so I'm a little younger than you. But I came of age during the transition between pagers to cell phones. But I personally felt nostalgia for, like, who hasn't tried to spell boobs on their pager when they first get it, right? Your book's been out for about a month now. At the time of this recording, how has the reception been? And really curious about, have you had any feedback about the beeper culture? Because your book's all about numbers, and back in the day, you communicate just through numbers alone. That was thematically cool.
The reception has been fantastic. I'm going all in as a writer now because of that kind of feedback. For the month of May, it was the Barnes & Noble Discover pick. So it was in every Barnes & Noble in the country. And I've gotten hundreds and hundreds of pictures of people, taking pictures in every Barnes & Noble in the corner of the U.S. and beyond. It was also an Indie Next pick, and Indie Next is for the American Bookseller Association's top 25 kind of indie books. So that was, fantastic. And all the support from, the indie booksellers, those are my kind of people. So that is, if you've had different colored hair, if you had piercings, if you had collected anything, went to any kind of con, kept anything mint in box, you're my kind of person. So like that kind of bookseller, we know each other. We have a shorthand. And, I didn't know about this. This was recent that, Hudson News Sellers in airports and train stations, they had a fantastic kind of AAPI month promotion. And, me along with some of my writer friends like Eve Chung and Sophie Wan and Angie Kim were all featured in this AAPI promotion. So again, a lot of like pictures from airports and all over the place, which is really encouraging. So that reception has been fantastic. The one thing I haven't really heard from is the Gen X folks saying, oh, I remember I had a beeper kind of thing. I've heard that from a few people. But the numbers, that beeper culture, 143 kind of thing, I want that to hopefully, be part of that conversation again, because it was such a great and fun time. And it immediately kind of, even if you didn't know exactly what those numbers meant or what that time where we weren't automatically connected through phones and instant messaging and everything, that distance being bridged by something as simple as your pocket vibrating and like a few digits conveying somebody's thoughts about you or to you, that's a bit of magic there. And, what a wonderful thing that it can be conveyed by numbers, So hopefully more of that in the future. And, 888, I didn't know it was a thing. People were telling me it's an angel number. What is an angel number? I still don't know. But then I went to a casino and I saw like one of the one-armed bandits with 888 on it. I was like, wow, it's a thing. I had no idea. Like 88, that's a very Chinese thing. We've seen that, all through our lives. But 888 with the 3, it's out there. So
yeah. So you mentioned that you're free from your corporate yoke as of this recording. What's next for you? Are you working on anything new? What's down the pipe, or are you focusing on this book right now?
My immediate responsibilities. I'm going to be doing, podcasts, virtual events, writing articles, promoting 888 Love, and hopefully working on my next book, pretty soon, getting back to it. I'm about 100 pages in manuscript format, but I just haven't looked at it in so long that I'm just like, maybe it's better to start fresh. But, it's a new world starting Saturday. But it wasn't necessarily a corporate yoke for me. Like there's a lot of stuff I loved about my job at Simon & Schuster. It just wasn't enough time in the day to be able to focus on, what I'm doing now. And, a brief story, again, with Simon & Schuster, we had our centennial party. We celebrated 100 years and we had 2 nights. One night, we had 35 of our best-selling authors come in and kind of speak to us at town hall. And then we had our party the night afterwards with just, our coworkers and stuff. But, at the show, I was like, oh, all these amazing authors. I can't wait to hear like some real nuggets of insight. And I thought, Bob Woodward, oh my goodness, he's going to say something that's going to change my life. And it wasn't Bob Woodward. The person that said something that really made me pay attention at that event was Ruth Ware. So Ruth Ware, she's famous for, her thrillers and, things. Yeah. So, and, what she said when she was telling her personal story was that, basically one day she felt like, I have to make this hobby pay. Like it can't be a hobby anymore. So her writing, and she was like, I have to invest in myself and just go all into this writing thing. So she basically quit her job and, found some daycare and, just started really focusing on writing in her career as a writer. And that sentiment really just carried through to me after that event. I was like, oh my gosh, that was it. That was the final real nugget of like, you gotta jump. Otherwise you're going to chicken out. So whether or not, 888 Love goes on to do, well, it's enough for me at this point of saying that, okay, I've gotten enough pats on the back where I'm going to take the risk. I'm going to invest in myself. I want to be a writer. I'm going to do this full time. So, part of my story is that, I had a great team of folks at Flatiron Macmillan who helped me get this book out into the world. And then I had a great family at Simon & Schuster who was willing to kind of push me out of the nest and just, say, we're behind you kind of here. So, I thank everyone from those 2 companies, especially, and my friends and family, of course, who really, supported me through this. My wife, obviously, in my family, those voices in the back of my head are the ones that are saying, here's what's next, and we're with you.
Well, congratulations once again. I mean, publishing a book, it is a journey. It is, it's your baby and it's out there. And I wish you the best of luck with your second book. I know like sophomore slump is a thing. Let's hope that it does not happen to you. And if so, I wish you the best.
Thank you so much, Marvin. Thank you. It was great speaking with you tonight. Tonight. I don't even know what time it is anymore.
Time of the flat circle.
Yeah. Time, literally, after the pandemic, it's whatever we've got. But it's amazing that, what you're doing, the attention that we get for AAPI authors and, my fellow authors who are out there in the world experiencing similar things. It's such a great time that we get to share our stories no matter where we are in that spectrum. I'm just glad that I can bring this story out that highlights, Asian American joy and just be like, the most traumatic thing that happens in this book is really, this young man dealing with a broken heart. And that's something that I'm glad I can put out into the world and have other people say, you know, I can kind of relate. So thank you so much for your time, and thank you for your listeners. And I hope people like the book, and please pick up a copy.
And that was Abraham Chang. His debut novel, 888 Love and the Divine Burden of Numbers, is available now at booksellers everywhere, including, as always, the official Books and Boba online bookstore. So definitely check it out by going to booksandboba.com and clicking on our bookshop link. All purchases on our bookshop support not only the Books and Boba book club, but also your local bookstore. So we really do appreciate all your support. Before we go, just a quick reminder that our June 2024 book club pick is Greta and Valden by Rebecca K. Riley, which is a contemporary comedy about two Maori Russian siblings living in Auckland, New Zealand, and their messy, messy lives. Having a great time getting through this book. And if you are a Patreon supporter, we are, as always, doing a read-along on Discord. So I'm really looking forward to hearing your thoughts of the book as we read along. And if you've already finished the book and have thoughts to share, don't forget to let us know either on Discord or Goodreads. As always, we love to include your thoughts on our discussion episodes whenever possible. But with that, that'll do it for this episode of Books and Boba. Thank you once again to Abraham Chang for chatting with us. And yeah, we'll see you all next time. Bye, everybody. Thanks for listening to Books and Boba. This podcast was hosted by Marvin Yue and Rira Yu and edited and produced by Marvin Yue. Follow the book club on Twitter and Instagram by going to @BooksandBoba and engage with us on Goodreads on our Goodreads group. You can also check out past episodes of the podcast by going to booksandboba.com and by subscribing to us on your favorite podcast app. Don't forget, you can support Books and Boba and Asian American authors by purchasing books at our bookshop.org account. Check out the link in our show notes and also at booksandboba.com. Books and Boba is a proud member of the Potluck Podcast Collective, a collective of Asian American hosted podcasts featuring unique voices and stories from the Asian diaspora. Learn more about the collective and check out our fellow Potluck shows by visiting the website podcastpotluck.com. Thanks for listening.
Hey, I'm Phil Yu, and you may know me from a blog called Angry Asian Man.
And I'm Jeff Yang, author, journalist, and celebrity dad.
We host a podcast called They Call Us Bruce, an unfiltered conversation about what's happening in Asian America.
Each week or so, we host a discussion about some of the most vital and interesting topics in our pop culture and our community, bringing in guests who are shaping and informing this thing called Asian America from Hollywood to D.C. and beyond.
We got media, entertainment, food, family, politics, representation.
The good, the bad, the WTF of it all.
So check us out wherever you get your podcasts or at theycallusbruce.com.
Peace.
Peace.